But yeah, it's called Things That Can't Be Taken Back, and I'm going to read a couple selections from it. And this is the very first page before even the title page. So that's kind of cool. This is a fairy tale, which is the only kind of thing you have the energy for after all. In the fairy tale, you are deep underwater, and you're making things up about yourself in second person, or perhaps you're telling the truth. But the important thing is that you are hiding in the crevice of that uncertainty. You say, Zach VandeZande was sad in an unremarkable way, in the way we are all sad, hungry in the way we are all hungry, alone in the way we are all alone. You decide that you'll fix this, and then you do. So that's that. Your friend Josh came into your office and said, so I've been thinking about buying a typewriter. By the end of the day, you had both ordered one. That's how all this started. Of course, that's not how all this started. You and I both know that. It started when you were tromping through the woods in Louisiana, 10 years old with mud-flecked jeans, that pale, fresh rain mud from the coulee at the edge of your property. Or it started when you sat on the wrong side of a railing on the way to the Grand Canyon, and you gave a long moment over to thoughts of tumbling down the cliff face you were on. Or it started when you asked a girl at work what she was doing that night, and she said that her mom was in town and that they were going to bake cookies or look at old photos, something like that. The exact memory is gone, as it is with so much of my memory, but the point is that you said, well, can I come? And you were serious, and she didn't know it. Later, you got married. I feel like this is like in my face. Anyway, what I'm getting at is the beginning, the real beginning. It can't be found, and that's okay. It has to be. It could have been something traumatic, or something wonderful, or something as mundane as looking at an old photo from Life magazine and thinking to yourself, Evelyn McHale, how did it come to this, and what happens next? You're up nights thinking about that photo, and you don't know why, and it causes problems at home, and then one day the typewriter comes in the mail, and you spool the ribbon through the little metal piece that holds the ribbon, wondering what it's called, thinking that knowledge about typewriters is going or gone from the world at large, and you put a piece of paper in, and you think of Evelyn, and you try and give her what she would deserve. Anyway, some backstory. This photo of Evelyn, it's actually in the book when it's published, and it's never going to be published. Come on. She's left from the Empire State Building and landed on a car. So she's dead on the car. So in case you guys want to look at that later, you know. And this first vignette is called The Daydream Girl. It's a sad story, guys. Don't laugh at that. You guys are assholes. These kinds of things always seem to happen to me. Shut up, Regine. A girl falls 14 stories. Yeah, she's going to land on my car. And there she is, all nestled in the hood that's wrapped her up like warm blankets, kind of half smiling, but you know something's off because her neck's turned a little funny. But get this, eyes closed, no blood. Just a beautiful, sad girl in a red sundress asleep on my car. It's enough to make a guy drop his latte. Really, just a special moment. I imagine it sounded like when you push on a cookie sheet and then it pops back into place, just deeper. I was on the wrong side of a plate glass window at the time and didn't hear anything. She just came into the frame and disappeared into my car the way a stone wrapped in a red flag would. Let's say China's. What I instead heard was the air being sucked out of the room by a dozen coffee-breathed mouths and one, oh, God. Everybody kind of stayed put, but I got up and I walked over to the door and opened it. My car was honking that slow, plaintive alarm that comes factory installed, not one of those aftermarket sirens that are only good for scaring the cats away. I remembered I'd left my keys inside on the table. I thought the horn fit anyway. I was just going to turn it off because that's how we maintain social order. I looked at her for a long time. She had nice skin, almost translucent. Her shoes looked expensive. I'd say she looked like a model, but her nose was too big for it. There's always something. I'm not really an asshole in real life. People were gathering around, watching out of windows, you know, the way a city does when it isn't something they can do anything about and therefore don't have to ignore. I thought this would be a great love story, if only, and maybe I did fall in love with her a little bit. Anyhow, I couldn't stop studying her face. The girl with dark hair and a secret. I wished that she could fly. Anyway, that's that one. And then there's another one here before I go back into the second person terribleness. This one's called the Bader-Meinhof phenomenon. I wrote, I saw your face in the wood grain of my kitchen table, and then I crossed it out. The sentence, I mean. I wanted to hit on something common but compelling, and I thought pareidolia was a good start, but there on the page it came off as a contrived and quotidian lie, which I wanted to seem artful and smart and maybe a little mysterious, I guess. All week I'd been making a list of words that sounded impressive. I was seeing her everywhere anyway. She was my barista, then she was at the grocery store buying ice cream while I did my weekly trip, then she was riding her bike past the laundromat, plus it's true about my kitchen table. It was like suddenly she'd metastasized into the gaping commonplace wounds of my little life, or else she was always heading there in a peristaltic motion that brought us together slowly like heartbeats. Serendipity. Or else, and this is just too much for my self-concept and how much I'll trust my brain ever again, or else she was always there at the grocery store and the laundromat and the coffee house that always smelled acrid and burnt. She was always there, and I was blind to the knowledge until I'd lost my headphones and felt forced to make eye contact. That's the kind of thing that can make a man wonder what all he's never paid attention to, how to make it up to a girl like her. I thought she'd understand if I just knew what to call it. Anyway, this section is sort of called Diary of a Vitruvian Man, but I don't know if I'm going to keep it like that, but whatever. You decide that you don't believe in novels anymore, because stories aren't like that. Lives aren't like that. Lives don't have arcs. The scope of memory is not shaped out of marble. You type out on your typewriter, here then is the truth. When you use a memory, you use it up. You leave in its place the memory of remembering. Eventually all you have are memories of remembering memories of remembering memories. You could go on. You could fill the page. The truth is that you have not yet begun. That is to say, the things that you think were the beginning, those things on page 1, they aren't really. You think your anger is profound and just and deserved. You put it on like a well-worn suit, like an apt simile. You see how it fits you. All the while, you have no idea that this has always been beginning, just as it's always been ending. And before you are through, you will see so much of your human condition, but you'll still remain oblivious. For now, you're in your head turning things over, thinking that you must have something worth saying buried at the dank bottom of you, because your mom said you were special, because an online IQ test said you were a genius, because every now and then you get a nice email from a stranger about the book you wrote, because if not that, then the religion that you have thrown yourself into, the religion of the written word, turned out to just be masturbating. And if that's what you've been doing with yourself for the last big chunk of your life, well, then it turns out you are no artist, you terrible fuck. You are only a man who is too afraid to enjoy his real job for fear that it will somehow define him and become all that he ever was. There's a knock on the door. Come in, you say, mostly because that is what is said, and you've terrified yourself a little bit. It's one of your students, and she wants to talk to you about T.S. Eliot. You want desperately to talk to her about her hair, which is that saffron color that doesn't grow in any honest way out of a person's head, but which, given a long enough timeline and the search for some kind of identity, every college-age girl will try. It's not mean, guys. Don't lie to that. It looks good on her, as it does on so many of the fortunate, but some girls, they can't pull it off. I just think, she is saying, I just think that for all that objective correlative stuff and that birth of modernism or whatever, I don't know. No, come on, I say. Finish your thought. It might be a good one. I just think he was probably angry or sad at his position in life, so he wrote about that. I just don't think it defines a generation the way you said it did. Well, you say, that's a fair way to look at it. She smiles, which wakes you up in a way. So many students don't visibly give a shit. You spend the next 20 minutes going over some finer points of the wasteland until, hurry up, please, it's time, and she's gone. And you find yourself back in the dull gray aquarium of your office. You just failed the nerd test. That guy got the wasteland reference. What a douche.
You said it in a poem.
What? True. This one's called There's Something You Must Know. And this one didn't actually happen again. I was drunk, and I couldn't remember her name. I desperately wanted to. Walking into that particular room of that particular party, I had no idea it would be her there. It was a doomed enterprise, but I went about it anyway. Have you ever seen a cell phone tower off in the distance in the Pacific Northwest at night, the way it blinks unassumingly, just, I'm here if you want to look? There's your simile for the way I stood there, dumb-smiled, wishing in my guts to catch her eye, and I did. From across the room, I did. She nodded me over, and I went over. She introduced me around, demonstrating incontrovertibly how terrible I was as a human being in general for not being able to remember her name, when she could so easily toss off mine, when she was so lovely, how she would tuck a strand of hair behind her ear while nodding along to a conversation, how she was one of those people who knew really well how to be a friend. Someone was talking about how Freud said a thing that wasn't true, but he said it loudly and convincingly enough that it became true in spite of itself, in spite of the man and his cigar. If I had been the one to say it, it would have been pretty good. As it was, I clenched my teeth into a smile and looked for a reason to beg off with her, timing my sips of beer with hers so I could be the one to get her another. That time came, and when I came back, she was alone on a couch. We talked our nervous talk. It was one of those slippery conversations. Suddenly she said that I had an interesting name and that hers was so boring and bland. Then she said, "Listen," and said them out loud one after another. I smiled, and she let out this nervous little laugh that came from the back of her throat. It was a small gift, gracious and filled with a half-conscious forgiveness and approval. She wanted to be sure that I knew. Okay, this is back to me now. But memoir, it's not really me. I don't want to go all reality hunger on you guys. I'll stop. You decide it's not even novels. It's stories that you don't believe in if you get right down to it. What's the point of a story? Is it lying to yourself in the best way possible? Is it just the staving off of death? Is that it? That can't be it. But then you start thinking about all the things that are written down, Shakespeare plays, the Ramayana, the dream songs of John Berryman. You put a thing down on paper and it is beaten death. It exists outside of you. It's no longer the cluttered mess in your brain. You give it shape and it's a story or a poem, and then it is art, and then it is permanent, or at least permanent as far as you can wrap your head around it. Some weird Greek notion of eternity. You decide if that's what you're really after, then maybe you're just scared of being an agnostic secular humanist. All those years in church, all that time of thinking to yourself that so much of organized religion is just explainable psychological phenomena. A worldwide Stanley Milgram experiment put a steeple on that Skinner box, old boy. And what kind of an asshole is it that can't see that maybe Adam and Eve is a metaphor and not the literal truth? Storytelling, that is, not history. And that it wouldn't really change and shouldn't really change someone's faith or their belief to admit that the Bible was written as a way of explaining things to people who did not understand science and physics and cellular biology. And you're rambling, but still, like the story goes of how you were terrified to be a Christian because of your inability to feel anything, so too are you afraid of being an agnostic secular humanist because you are still unable to feel anything. Look, though, you say aloud to yourself, look. Stories are bullshit. Narratives are more tightly wound bullshit. These things are happening, and they happen because of the decisions you make, the ones that are somewhere between not having free will and having it, but it not mattering. What you need, you say to yourself, is a premonitional free will with a sense of inception and consequence. You're going to crawl out of bed to buy a muffin and a coffee, but you don't know what happens next, either because of that decision or just because it is what happens next. If you knew, well, then that's having free will that matters. And that's what a story is, free will with a sense of purpose, which is why, of course, it's bullshit.